item 1 is declarations of interest, and I don't have any interest to declare. Agenda item 2 is to approve and sign the minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes, don't we? Of the meetings held on the 2nd of August 2021 and 16th of December 2021. So I've checked those minutes and I'm about to sign them. So moving on to agenda item 3 is public participation, and we have one person registered to speak. We have Patrick. So if you'd like to move to that end of the table, I'm sorry, it's a bit of a distance away. I'm sure.
You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Okay, if you'd like to start now, I'm sure you'll be within time. So.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here and to speak on this. I do feel quite passionate, not only about my ward, Guildhall, but about the topic we're talking about. Firstly, city centre-wise, in terms of what's being proposed there, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. You know, I realise that the reasons why people drink in the city centre might be very different to the second case in Union Terrace. So I'm not talking about that city centre-wise. And I'm happy to work alongside Paul Morrison, Jane Mowat, whoever, on that. Secondly, about Clarence Street and Union Terrace, I feel very strongly this is a different case altogether. I don't think the option of introducing what I refer to as an alcohol-free zone is the right approach at all in that area. We're talking about people who have got illnesses. We're talking about people with addictions. I really don't believe criminalising people or potentially criminalising people who need help to get better is going to be the answer. And I do talk with some expertise in this field. I'm a counsellor for Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon. Very sadly, I was married to an alcoholic, and I know the downward slope. And I'm quite emotional about it. I think it's the wrong approach. Okay, so the options you've got. Firstly, you introduce consultation. I don't think there's any point in doing that personally, nor do residents or businesses that I have spoken to in the city centre. They don't think it's the solution, but that's one option. The second one, do nothing, basically, that will, and I suppose the suggestion from that is that by doing the second option, you're not actually going to help either Paul or Jane or others to improve things. I would suggest that's not the case. I think a third option would be to look at rehabilitation programmes. I would suggest that the executive member for community safety should be pressing the administration to get the money from the government that was proposed for drug rehabilitation and supporting addictions that Boris Johnson mentioned in December. I don't think we've got enough money in York to deal with it ourselves. I would agree about that. I don't think there's any point punishing changing lives either. They haven't got the money, but they need support, they need help. So that would be the route that I would do it. I've been on the police authority. I've been vice chair of the police and crime panel. I know from experience that actually alcohol-free zones just don't work. I mean, you just move the problem somewhere else. Councillor Craghill and I were at a very, very serious meeting the other night to address the concerns of residents following the 2 murders in Markham Crescent. The residents made it quite clear during that meeting they did not support this option at all. They feel it's going to push the problems into streets where they live. And they have sympathy with the people who have the addictions also. So it's not helping in the slightest. I'm also concerned about the equalities impact. I know we always have this set jargon that we'll address that if it comes into being, but actually the inequalities of the people that live in Lowther Street and Town End Street and the effect this will have on them is absolutely phenomenal. And I really don't think that, that communities that are impoverished and living in poor housing accommodation, etc., should have to deal with this as well. So from every angle, I absolutely don't think it's the right thing to do. So I think that I want to work very closely with Paul Morrison, with the Safer York Partnership, with Superintendent Khan, as I already am doing, to try and address the issues we've got in the Guildhall ward. But one very, very last thing that I want to say here that has annoyed me and really upset me.
Could you wind up fairly quickly?
Yeah, that's really upset me for a long time is the fact that ward councillors are not involved. The fact that Councillor Craghill didn't inform me about any of this, even though we're ward councillors dealing with the same issues. I have to say I'm very pleased that I've spoke to Jane Mowat in the last few days and received an apology for the fact that I've not been involved in all of this, even though it didn't need to come from Jane. It's not Jane's fault. I do want to be involved, and I think the bit in the document that Jane sent me about the way forward, where it mentions ward councillors, is clearly accurate, but it's not true. Ward councillors haven't been involved, not at all. So from now on, I want to work very, very closely with all agencies. I want Councillor Craghill to have the
Could you wind up, please?
I am, yeah, very serious review of what happened in Markham Crescent. I think that needs to happen first, and it needs to be led by the council.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those comments, which I've listened to very carefully, and I will consider when we come to that agenda item. So moving on to agenda item number 4, which is the request to consult about the introduction of a public space protection order within the city centre. So I believe that's Jane who's going to present on that. Thank you.
Yes, so the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act included the power to issue a public space protection order as a part of a mechanism to approach antisocial behaviour, and I'll sort of cover the wider perspectives in a minute. So the ethos behind a PSPO is to deal with persistent or continuing antisocial activity by individuals or groups that are having a detrimental effect on the quality of life of people within that locality. So within the city centre, over a number of years, we have experienced high levels of antisocial behaviour, particularly at weekends. Saturday afternoons being probably the most crucial time. Levels of antisocial in the city centre have remained low over the last 2 years, but as we all know, that's largely down to the impact of COVID and the fact that restrictions have been in place for considerable periods over the last 2 years, with businesses, particularly the hospitality industry, being closed and limitations on people meeting. However, we feel that as we have started to come out of the COVID situation and return to some levels of normality, that will also bring back normal levels of antisocial behaviour that we would see in the city. Over these last 2 years, we have implemented different ways of working with the police to try and look at whether there is an alternative to PSPO. So we've utilised police dispersal powers. However, those powers need to be authorised by an inspector. They are only enforced for a 48-hour period, and they have to be done prior to the event occurring, which means that it's not a very timely way of dealing with issues when they occur, although they do give the same outcome in that police officers can seize alcohol if it is associated with antisocial behaviour. So the crucial element, I think, to consider here is that this only applies to the drinking of alcohol where antisocial behaviour is present. It's not a ban on drinking. People can still enjoy a drink in our open spaces. And of course, one of the positive benefits that we saw from COVID was an increase in outside hospitality, particularly when the weather's warm and in the summer months. And that is all permissible with the PSPO in place. It simply provides the police with a very, very clear steer on being able to seize alcohol where antisocial behaviour is occurring, and also for our officers within the council who are present in the city centre, for example, the neighbourhood enforcement team, to also be able to seize that alcohol and to enforce the PSPO if it is being breached. At this stage, we're only asking to go to consultation, and I think that's really important. It gives the opportunity for businesses to input in the process to raise their concerns through the consultation, and it will be the results and analysis of that consultation that will then drive what the eventual order would look like if that is the option that people are keen to pursue.
Thank you very much. I don't really have any questions on this one. It's interesting backdrop going on outside. I'll just wait for 1 second, I think. Oh, the city centre. Yeah, I'm very happy to approve this to go out to consultation. I do think it's important, as you just said, Jane, that to emphasise that this is approving the beginning of a consultation, and that we will then be hearing back from both businesses and residents, because quite a lot of residents are included in the areas within the walls and within the map in here that will be consulted on. And I do think it's also important to repeat that York City Centre is generally a very safe and welcoming place, but we also know, as you said, that there are serious concerns about the behaviour of a minority that is often related to excessive consumption of alcohol. And this can be within the core shopping area, and it can be also be within other areas such as Walmgate and other parts of within the walls. I think it's also very important, as you did say very clearly, really, to emphasise that the PSPO order will not ban drinking anywhere in the city centre. It's only used in situations where people are drinking outside and behaving in an antisocial or threatening manner. And that means that police officers can seize and dispose of alcohol. And if that isn't complied with, there is a fixed penalty fine that can be issued. And I think finally, and this will apply to the other agenda item as well, I think it's really important to say that this is being put forward as one tool at the disposal of city partners on this issue. It isn't meant to be the solution to everything, but it is a very helpful option to have available to be used when necessary. So on that basis, I'm happy to approve option 1 on page 16 to consult with local businesses, residents and interested stakeholders on the introduction of the PSPO. And I just wanted to clarify, do we have any idea when that consultation period will start?
Yes, so we can start the consultation period, and obviously we're sort of at the end of February now, so we'll start that consultation period at the beginning of March.
Okay.
So we are due to bring the findings to the decision session in April.
Right, yes. Yes.
So the idea behind that is that we would have the order in place sort of ahead of the main tourist season. Just to add into that discussion, and also it does link into to agenda item 5 as well, is the implementation of a PSPO is just one part of a multi-agency plan to address antisocial behaviour. We don't ever see it as the answer to dealing with antisocial behaviour. We have to look at all of the factors and causes that are behind that behaviour occurring in the first instance, and that means engaging extensively with our partners. With the city centre, we do that very much in partnership with the York BID and with both the local police and the British Transport Police. And again, it will be just part of a multi-agency delivery plan that will be focused on all aspects of antisocial behaviour, not just a standalone order in its own right. And the same obviously applies to Union Terrace too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that consultation will be on the council website?
Yes, it will be widely available, widely publicised, and we will promote it through our social media contacts as well. Okay,
thank you very much. So is that okay for the minutes? Yeah, thank you. So moving on to agenda item 5, which I'm not looking at properly, I should say the right title of it. Request to consult about the introduction of a public space protection order at Union Terrace and Clarence Gardens. We'll come back to that in a second. So I think Paul is going to present this one.
Right, this report is, as you said, it's a report to agree to start some consultation around the potential introduction of a public space protection order at Union Terrace and Clarence Gardens. I think just to try and give it a little bit of background, I won't go over all the background around public space protection orders because James already mentioned that in the previous report. But in terms of Union Terrace, you know, it's obviously one of the sort of busier car parks on the edge of the city. It's one of the main areas for coaches bringing visitors to the city. And, you know, it's not far from the campus of the University of York St John's. So there's a high footfall in the area. And just adjacent to that really is Clarence Gardens. Some of the sort of same individuals that have been causing issues in Union Terrace have also caused some problems in Clarence Gardens. And obviously there is a risk of things being moved, and that's why I wanted to include Clarence Gardens within this report as well. Just to reiterate, in terms of any options that we'll be looking at as part of the consultation, anything around a ban on alcohol, drinking alcohol, it's a two-stage process, so there needs to be the alcohol involved and also antisocial behaviour, and any other, you know, issues around whether we look at removing large groups of people. Again, there would need to be issues around that as well as just being in a large group, so it wouldn't necessarily pick that up unless there was some other problems as well. During the course of 2021, obviously there's been quite a lot of restrictions in terms of people being able to go out and that during this period, but there's still been 528 incidents of crime and antisocial behaviour reported across this area. Of these, 182 reports of ASB and crime that related to alcohol specifically, and those figures show that 129 of those were in Union Terrace and 51 were in Clarence Street. I think we've been trying to work with the police around the incidents and the problems we've had with regards to sort of Union Terrace particularly. You know, there's been problems with the toilet facilities there that have been damaged, and Healthmatic, who operate that on behalf of the council, have contacted to make us aware of these problems and these issues. We've also been kind of liaising with the police around how we can tackle this. And, you know, as has been said, you know, a PSPO is one tool in the box in these sort of situations, and will not resolve all of these issues on its own, but we do need to work together with all partners just to make sure that you know, this issue is being tackled. Within this area, you know, there's been 10 dispersal orders. Dispersal orders are sort of quite similar to the public safety protection orders. They are done by North Yorkshire Police, but they do need to get an inspector to authorise them, so there can be a delay sometimes in terms of how quickly they're able to get those put in place. I think that one of the things that we need to be aware of is obviously the changing lives of a homeless hostel within the site. You know, this wouldn't affect within their area of their sort of site. I think they are aware that there are problems there. They are working closely with the police and ourselves around that. I think that anecdotally we have information that residents of Changing Lives Hostel have been targeted by other people and other individuals. So I think in some respects it may be welcomed by some of the residents to give them some kind of degree of support and assistance in terms of that. But I think that, you know, we just need to continue really to recognise that because of where this is, there's obviously a large number of visitors that come through, a large number of residents that come through, a lot of people catching buses from that area. And this does have an impact in terms of people's perceptions of the city centre as a whole, you know, and you know, and York generally. But this is one tool that we are looking at using around this, and continue to work closely with the police around this issue as a whole. I don't know if anyone's got any questions.
Okay, right, thank you. I've got a couple of questions, but before that, I maybe should have said this before you started in a way. I'd just like to get us to clarify the area. I think there's a map in here which is quite accurate about the area, but it's the language that we're using in terms of the naming of parts of that area. And my understanding is the proposal at the moment, although the boundary could change following consultation, is that the area includes Union Terrace car park And we've included at the moment the street called Union Terrace, which is nearby, because there has been some displacement activity, but we can see what comes back on the consultation from that. And then the area includes, it does include Clarence Gardens, which are called Clarence Gardens, not Clarence Street Gardens. And it includes Clarence Street, which is very much the centre, you know, quite a centre of concern as well, alongside the car park. So I just think we need to get clear throughout going forwards
With terminology. I
which
think that's a
bits
fair
we're
point,
actually
yeah.
referring to, because obviously for residents that's very important. So if we could minute that, if that's clear. Yeah, thank you. Right, so one of my questions was going back to that question about the geographic area, and will having this in place just displace a problem to somewhere else? Obviously, that will be addressed partly through the consultation. We'll see what people come back and say. But I wonder if you just have any views about that at the moment, about the pros and cons of where the area should be defined and how that works.
I'll pick that up, Councillor Craghill. So we have had significant discussions within the Community Safety Hub about the issues. We are well aware that PSPO can result in some displacement, and we have experienced that in the past with PSPO, and that's why we would never see it as a standalone solution to problems, because we've got to be mindful of the consequences of putting that order in place. My feeling from analysis of the police incidents reported in the area, which have triggered the suggestion that PSPO could assist, are that they have been very particularly localised around Union Terrace car park, and we do feel that the ability to be able to very quickly seize alcohol will have some beneficial effect, as it has previously, in that those individuals will quite readily surrender their alcohol when they see a uniformed officer approaching. This is part of a multi-agency problem-solving process. So Superintendent Khan and myself have had some significant conversations around how we change the way that we approach antisocial behaviour, that we deal with things in a much more joined up fashion, that we're working closely both with the neighbourhood policing team, but also involving our wider partners in the creation of a multi-agency problem-solving plan, which recognises every agency's resources and powers to be able to tackle all aspects of the behaviour that's going on. As with all of our problem-solving meetings, and we're about to widen the net now to include our wider partners in this process. So we've got a first meeting arranged, I think, next week or the week after, to start that process off. We would be looking at the impact of all of the things that we put in place, as well as delivering those actions that we've agreed. So in relation to the PSPO, yes, we will be looking at the consultation, the results that come from that consultation, and also what that might do in terms of shaping the conditions that we put in place as a result of it. But we would also, through that group, be looking at issues like displacement and putting in place mechanisms to deal with that if that was to occur. The idea being that we very much, as we've done in other areas of the city where we've had issues of this sort of nature occur, it is very important that we keep that engagement with the community, that we keep the residents informed as to what we're doing, and involve them in that process so that they are aware and have got a voice as well. So I think, you know, I am fairly confident that this is part of a much bigger package to look at antisocial behaviour in that particular area of the city. And I suspect that as we start to drive that multi-agency work forward, we will start to develop other projects as a result of that, which will impact on other parts of that whole area.
Okay, thank you for that. As I say, I think, you know, we will get responses when the consultation goes out, so that will feed into that as well. I had another couple of questions, partly picking up on what Councillor Fitzpatrick raised. Now, I attend a lot of meetings at the moment, so it's sometimes hard to be absolutely clear, but I believe we did have a meeting with Councillor Fitzpatrick and Councillor Looker some time back, didn't we, when we raised the question of the PSPO? I think we raised the principle of it. Right, anyway, so you don't remember, you're not sure, Jane? No? Anyway, never mind, I believe we did. But anyway, I entirely agree that it's obviously very useful for ward councillors to be involved in all of these things. And I believe the meeting you mentioned next Monday has invited all ward, not next week, whenever it is, has invited ward councillors.
Yes, that's correct. Yes,
Okay.
it has.
There was another question that Councillor Fitzpatrick raised about, the concept of rehabilitation and substance abuse, and obviously that's way outside the parameters of this decision today. But I obviously don't disagree with her that, as you said, in terms of that wider package of measures of how we address this sort of issue, I entirely agree that might come into it. I know that our teams tend to apply whatever they can for government funding as it comes along. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, so in the multi-agency problem-solving group, we've involved the public health team, because it will be the public health team that will lead around substance misuse. So they are very much engaged in this process. We have had some discussion as well with Changing Lives, and again, they will be involved in the multi-agency problem-solving process as well.
So if there's an opportunity to apply for that funding,
Yes.
we will be doing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I think I'll just make a few comments. Clearly, quite many of the principles that we discussed in the previous item also apply here, in the sense that we, as you've been saying, we don't see this as the solution to everything. It's a useful tool as part of a much wider approach. There have been some very serious incidents in this area in recent months. And I know that specifically in terms of Clarence Street and around Union Terrace, residents have told us that they feel very intimidated by people drinking in the street. And as you say, Jane, we do currently have a number of initiatives underway to address that, working with the police and other partners. So yeah, it is just one tool. And I also note that in the paper at paragraph 10, you suggest this order could include the power to remove from the area groups of 3 or more who are causing antisocial behaviour. So presumably that's part of option 1 that we're approving, is it?
Yes, so those are suggested prohibitions that we could put in place, but again, the consultation will very much drive what consultees feel are appropriate prohibitions. What we have to be mindful of is that the legislation is quite specific, so there are things that, whilst residents may want us to address them through PSPO, we cannot use that particular power as the means to do that. But again, the whole purpose of the consultation will inform the multi-agency problem solving anyway. So if there are other issues that come up through the consultation that sit outside of the use of the PSPO, we will be considering them as a group to look at what we can do to address those through other mechanisms and other legislation as well.
Okay, so I can see that people could take very different views of that suggestion, whether it could be misapplied to people who are just gathering together, but hopefully that wouldn't be the case. I can also see that, on the other hand, given the concerns of the residents, it could be a very useful way of being able to move on people who are actually intimidating others. So, as you say, again, that's something that we will look at further through the consultation process. I absolutely agree that this is not the only approach to use in terms of tackling the issues in this area. But I also believe that we are addressing this in quite a number of different ways. And this is one tool that we can use. We may need to we may need to look at a number of other things, including further facilities in the city centre. There's a whole range of things that we could look at and that we have started to look at. So on that basis, I'm very happy to approve, including the proposal for consultation. And we'll see what we get back and take it from there. So happy to approve option 1 at paragraph 12 on page 23. And I think with reference to paragraph 10 as well, talks about the different options for what the PSPO could be. Is that okay? Yeah, as a way of putting it. Okay, I believe we do not have any other business. So the meeting is closed. Thank you very much.